Hey, Myles.
Hey, Cam.
Have you ever heard of La Bohème?
Ah, Maria Alibamba. Maria Alibamba, yeah.
Not quite. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inconceivable Media. I'm your host, Cam.
And I'm Myles.
And this week, I got to introduce Myles to the wonderful world of opera with the classic La Bohème by Puccini. Originally premiering in 1896, La Bohème is a four-act opera where we follow several young adults in 19th century Paris that are living the bohemian lifestyle. So, Myles, what were your thoughts on your first opera experience?
Well, I still think the genetic opera is a real opera. But in comparison here, I actually really liked this one. I felt it was somewhat relatable. The characters were really well done. Mm-hmm. One thing I thought I would be a little annoyed about is the constant singing, because I don't like musicals that much. But it was actually really good. It was, I don't want to use the term bearable, because it was actually good.
Well,
it was enjoyable. Is the term I guess I'll use.
I'd say that's a pretty good endorsement for your first time, especially, as you just said, if you're not already a fan of musicals. Which kind of leads me to my follow-up question. So how would you compare it to other musical experiences you had in the past? So you compared this to Repo already.
Yes.
So what are some other things that you have seen, heard, or whatever? Like, what musicals have you heard or seen?
Well, everybody's heard High School Musical. Unfortunately, I've been dragged through that a few times, and it's pretty terrible.
What about, I don't know, anything by like Andrew Lloyd Webber or something? Well, actually, maybe that's not a good place to go, because that would lead us to something like Cats, which you just we don't need to talk about that. Yeah. Okay. So what about something like Les Mis or Sweeney Todd or anything like that? Have you ever? No?
I've seen them, but like I said, I'm not a big fan of the musicals. It's
okay.
I don't know what it is about them. They seem really lackluster to me. Like either they're trying to be something they're not, or they're just taking music and trying to just put it in where even poetry could be instead of music.
Okay.
And it just, to me, it doesn't feel like it fits.
As opposed to, so here, everything just works, is what you're saying,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. It worked very well. It flowed into each other nicely, even after scenes would end and others would begin. It felt very...
kind of organic?
Yeah, organic. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic.
Okay, so would you recommend this to other people, and how would you recommend it to them?
Well, I would actually recommend this to other people. I think it's an excellent story, especially for people who, like me, have never really heard of opera, or their only real experience with opera would be like the Phantom of the Opera, which is a pretty big pill to swallow. This was a lot more light and enjoyable.
Okay. So you wouldn't necessarily approach a recommendation in a certain way. Like, you wouldn't just go up to someone and say, "Oh, you really like music. Well, I think you should check out this opera." You don't feel that you would have to do that. You would just kind of be like, "You should watch this," or "You should hear this. It's really good."
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good to me. That's honest, seeing as how this is stuff that I do to get paid for. It's always nice to hear that from someone who would be in the audience, just say, "Oh yeah, I'll just go tell people to go see it." That's great. That's something that I love. I wish I heard more often. I'll say that. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and we'll dive into this a little bit more. So if anybody wants to, there are actually quite a few productions that you can choose from on YouTube, actually. Or if you want to, you can get a free trial for live at the Met online, and you can watch this and many other operas as well. So go and take a look, take a listen, and then come back to us. Okay, welcome back everyone. So now we will dive a little bit more into what actually happened in La Bohème. And just so that everyone else is aware of which specific production we watched the 2018 production that was done through the Metropolitan Opera House. And this production had Sonia Yoncheva as Mimi, Michael Fabiano as Rodolfo, Susanna Phillips as Musetta, Lucas Meacham as Marcello, Matthew Rose as Colline, and Alexei Lavrov as Chonard. Act 1, we're introduced to the four bachelors, Rodolfo, Marcello, Colline, Chonard, in their drafty loft, and we get to hear about their woes, specifically money-related. Chonard brings some happiness and money, so everyone decides to leave, but Rodolfo, he decides to stay home and work. But lucky for him, that's how he meets Mimi, and then they fall in love. Aww.
Act 2. Rodolfo and Mimi have joined up with the others in a nearby cafe to celebrate, and everything seems to be going well until Musetta, Marcello's on-again, off-again lover, shows up and crashes the party.
And then we move on to Act 3, where Marcello, Musetta, and Rodolfo are hanging out at an inn outside Paris, just doing what they do, which is staying alive in whatever way they can. Suddenly, a noticeably sick Mimi shows up to talk to Marcello about why Rodolfo seems distant and cold towards her. After a slight argument between Rodolfo and Marcello, Rodolfo admits that he's acting this way because he knows Mimi is dying, and he would rather have her live with someone rich than to die in poverty with him. So, while Rodolfo and Mimi make a final tryst to stay together for at least a little while, a fiery argument breaks out between Musetta and Marcello again. And they break up, and as the Clone High announcer would say, for real this time.
Fucking love Clone High. Act 4. We return to the loft. As a heartbroken Marcello and Rodolfo try to console each other over their lost loves. Chonard and Colline also try to cheer them up. But then, Musetta arrives with Mimi, and it looks like it will be it for her. The five try their best to make her last moments comfortable, but, unfortunately, life sucks, and in this case, you die.
Yes, as opposed to what they say in BoJack Horseman, right?
Life sucks, and it carries on.
Well, I guess life sucks, and it does carry on for the other five, but not so for Mimi. All right, so we'll dive into this a little bit more. So how would you describe your experience, Myles? Going through listening to everything and watching everything. Like, what was going through your mind?
Well, that's a very tough thing because I like to, when I'm watching something new, especially like a whole new media form that I'm really not very well known to, I go in with just no expectations, and I don't really want to compare it to too much.
I feel like that's a good way to approach things.
Because, like, yeah, I don't want to be like, well, this is no something spectacular, right? Like, this is no... What's that term?
What would you even compare this to, though?
Exactly. That's just it. Like, this is no space odyssey like Dune or something like that, I guess, right?
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, space opera, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the opera I know. Ones where they don't actually sing it all, but... But anyways, so yeah, I went into this not expecting anything and just wanted to see where it takes me. Because Even though I don't always seem it, I'm actually a very emotionally driven person. And I like to get swept up in the emotion of it all. And they started off very strong with it, with the two guys talking to each other and kind of like getting everything figured out. Third guy comes along. They establishing their characters extremely well. And I really like how they did that in the first two acts, where they get all the characters laid out and kind of tell you about everything. I also did like the way that this is in a different language, but the subtitles at the bottom are broken up to tell you what they're talking about without actually saying every single word they say. I did notice, and you remember me saying like, oh, they probably did an idiom here because they're not actually translating it, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, yeah, this is what they're saying, and this is basically what it means. And I'm like, yeah, but I kind of recognize it because I understand idioms. They're memes. Yeah. It's part of my main language.
Yeah.
My primary language. So I understand when they're being used. I don't always understand what they're trying to come across as, but I understand when they're being used. And in this case, I really liked it. I enjoyed it. Carrying on to
into the third and fourth acts.
The third and fourth acts, yeah.
Where we have all the drama, right?
Well, the first part was a little bit of comedy because of the way that they're interacting with each other and introducing the characters, showing the joys of life. And then, of course, you have to have that contrast,
right?
The darker side of it all. And I do like how they actually dimmed the lights in this iteration. They made everything a little bit darker and more gloomy to kind of show you that it's not as colorful as it was before. It was a very subtle and nice thing to do.
One thing that I will point out that I guess makes this production special is that this is a recreation of a production that was done in the 80s. And my names are failing me in terms of who was the creative mind at the Met who devised like the sets and everything the first time. But this is, in a way, this is probably the best way to introduce someone to this opera because it's set in the time period that it was written for, and they try to approach it that same way in terms of costuming, the design of the buildings and everything like that, and just the way everyone's going to look, as opposed to what you might do nowadays, where a lot of places try to spruce it up a little bit, and they might even translate it into the vernacular of wherever it's being done. So if it was being done in Canada, it might be done in English. Or
maybe
if it was
French.
Okay, depends on where in Canada you are. That is an option. If you're in Germany, you might do it in German, which of course means that you have to now translate all those idioms out because now it's for the people that are listening and you're probably not going to have subtitles. The reason why they have the surtitles, as we call them in the industry, is specifically for the people where you are not translating the language so that they know what the heck is going on. And like you said, generally speaking, a lot of those idioms and sometimes simple words like every time they said hello or goodbye or what's going on, that sort of thing, they didn't translate that because you probably heard it 50, 60 times across the entire thing. So by this point, hopefully you know that andiam means let's go and that addio means farewell.
Or, there are other things that they didn't add that was okay, like light the match.
Right, exactly.
Or strike the match, because they were doing that action as they said it. So it was just kind of a pointless thing to make you have to read, and that would take away from you actually enjoying watching the performance.
Exactly. So surtitles have only been around for maybe a little bit longer than we've been alive. For most of the 20th century, generally speaking, unless this was the Met or one of the other, like the Komische Opera House in Berlin or some of the other big ones around the world whose names, again, are just fleeing my mind, usually you would translate the opera because most of the people that you're selling tickets to can't speak Italian or French or German or Russian or Czech or whatever
They
language.
don't speak any language that isn't the primary there.
Exactly. So you would translate it because that way people actually know what the heck is going on. Because generally speaking, most people want to understand what's going on. And just reading a synopsis in their program isn't enough.
Yeah.
And then in, I think it must have been the mid-'80s or something like that, it was actually in Canada where they developed the idea of surtitles, which is we will give poetic translations in the vernacular and we will have that on the screen. So again, you get the feeling of what is being spoken, but you're not translating word for word, so you're not stuck there looking at it and missing what is actually happening.
Yeah. Which is one of the great issues with subs versus dubs.
Right.
So they found a happy medium, which I think is very enjoyable and quite nice. Another thing that they have in here that I think that movie theaters really need to re-employ.
Intermission?
Yes. Intermissions, I think, are an excellent thing to allow people to take a break, step away from it all, use the bathroom, maybe even go get some extra food because they're running out of food or drink.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like another investment capital that they're totally missing out on. Why are they not reusing this? Like, it's not too hard to just like cut or stop the movie at a certain point where tensions are high or anything like that. Stop for 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Let everybody leave and come back. Like, stretch your legs. There's been a couple times where I went to a movie that was like 2.5 or 3 hours long. And I'm like, I need to stand up. Like, I can't keep sitting like this. This is uncomfortable.
Honestly, I agree. And what's even more interesting, so I mean, old films, I think it was basically, if you were like over 100 minutes, then you would potentially have an intermission, because now you're getting to the point of, okay, we're going to have to think about having an intermission because people need to get up and stretch. And they need to go use the bathroom and things like that. We're going to be nice to the audience, which of course means that you need to add the intermission into your runtime because you can't just stop the film and start the film again.
Yeah.
Whereas these days, like,
we totally could.
You can
we
just pause it, or you can just have like a scene break where it's just like, okay, this is the point. You push pause. And everyone gets up for 10, 15 minutes and they walk outside and then they all come back and then you push play again and you just keep going. It's so weird because
we have the technology to do this, but we don't.
And not just that. It's also the fact that there seemed to be a trend where films were just kind of being shorter. Unless it was going to be something that was a huge epic like Titanic or something
Lord
like
of
that.
The Rings, yeah.
Exactly. And they kind of incorporated, since it's modern technology, the idea of, okay, we're going to pause or we're going to give people breaks because these are long movies. But most of the time they don't do that anymore. And they're just like, oh, well, I guess you have to come back and see the movie again if you had to get up and, use the washroom or something like that, which I don't know.
Means you'll probably miss at the same time.
Yeah, I know. I don't really agree with that thinking. But then again, considering that opera is my profession, I am used to intermissions because they never left.
Yeah.
It used to be that for a 4-act opera like this, you had like a 5-10 minute intermission between every act. You don't necessarily do that anymore because most people don't need that time, but that used to be the way it was. And who's to say we can't go back to that?
Progression, my friend. Progression.
Yeah, but is it really progress, though? I mean...
progress towards something you don't like is still progress.
Okay, fair enough. Fine.
This actually is really funny that we're talking about this because just this morning I saw a video from YouTube from a guy that I really respect and I like a lot of his work. His name is the Technology Connection, or Connections Technology.
Which
Technologies Connection, I think it is, which is his YouTube name.
Mm-hmm.
And what he does is he actually goes through and talks about different forms of technology and how they've changed, what they've improved, and what's not improved. The first thing that really introduced me to his channel was actually lanterns, because I was looking at getting some lanterns.
I was just thinking about that because he did the thing for storm lanterns,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and he kind of showed how they work.
What was it? Hurricane lanterns, yeah.
And then, they also talked about the Aladdin lamps and other lanterns as well to help get rid of the soot and everything.
Yep. Talk about the reason why they were designed the way they were designed.
So the video that he kind of posted while we're recording this is one for what was called a safe can opener. Now, he talks about how for the longest time, can openers were always needed, but nothing improved with them. And why is that? Because
it just works, right?
Yeah, it works, and it's fine. And he even talks about this at the end of his episode. We have to stop saying, this is fine. Like, yeah, I've got an old wooden ladder that's 70 years old. It's rickety and wobbles a lot, but it works fine. So I don't need to go out and get a proper safe ladder that's going to support me and be able to do everything I need to do, because this one works fine. Clearly it's not safe, but it still works fine. So that's kind of the thing about it. Progression is very much the same way. It only gets trumped by ignorance of moving forward.
Well, let's pull things back to talking about the opera. And, well, actually, now we should probably, dive into what was happening in this opera. And a good way to do that is to talk about our characters. So let's look at our lovely cast. We have, in a way, you'd say the primo uomo, the first man, Rodolfo, the tenor, who is a poet. And you said something about poets when we were watching this. What was that?
Yes, never date poets, because they're going to talk way too long and their stanzas are short.
Oh, ouch. Oh, poor Rodolfo. He tries. What did you think of like Rodolfo as a character?
Yeah, he was a pretty decent character. I don't know if I'd say he's one-dimensional. He feels it a little bit, but that might just be the way operas work.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're gonna put a pin in that, because that is something that I do want to talk about. So we'll get back to that in just a second. All right.
But no, the guy who portrayed him was great. But my only other complaint is everybody on the set was way too fat to be poor.
Which is also something else that we can talk about. All right. Next, we move on to our prima donna, Mimi, who is a seamstress who is suffering from tuberculosis and ultimately succumbs to it.
A seamstress? I thought she was a flower maker.
So the whole thing with the whole flower thing is that she puts flowers onto clothes.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah,
okay, I must have missed that in the reading aspect.
That's okay.
It's a little subtle, maybe.
It's there, but to be honest, it's something that I forget sometimes too. But then again, I'm a baritone, so I don't necessarily care about their relationship too much, because I'm more interested in our next guy, Marcello, the painter.
Well, as a baritone, you like the cello?
Oh, God. I don't even know how to respond to that, Myles. Marcello, he's a painter. He has a weird thing going on with Musetta that there's probably lots of things that can be talked about with that. But what do you think of Marcello?
I actually like his character. He's very well done.
Mm-hmm. So he feels more fleshed out than Rodolfo does.
Yes, he definitely does.
Interesting. Okay.
But it could just be the poet's... the issue with the poet, they're always brokenhearted and they're lovesick, because that's how they think they'll make their money.
Okay, I see.
Poetry is so much more than just love and death. There's way more to it, and I guess a lot of people kind of forget that.
Yeah. And then speaking of, that means we have Musetta, who is a free-spirited woman that, it says in the description of her character that she's a singer, but she doesn't really, that's only important in Act 3. What's really important is the fact that she has Marcello under her thumb.
And as the Flanders children would say, she's a harlot.
Hey, I said she's a free-spirited woman, okay? I don't have a problem with how she conducts herself. Others might. I don't. What about you?
Oh, no. She is who she is. And if Marcello can't handle that, then honestly, he needs to step to the side and leave.
And just allow her to continue being what she is, right?
Yeah.
And then we finally have...
I feel like we've had a character that had this very similar conundrum before in something we've watched.
We probably have. I mean, in a way, you could maybe see that is the dynamic that we have between Alma and Sam in Undone.
Yeah, that's who it was. Yes, that's exactly correct.
With Sam being the Marcello, and of course Alma being the Musetta. Although, I mean, yeah, definitely in terms of personality, very much paralleled here. Although not necessarily in what their actions actually brought out to. Anyways, then we have our final two of the circle of friends. We have Colline, the philosopher, and Schaunard, the musician. So what did you think of these two? I feel it's fair to call them a couple.
Yes. They're very much into each other, but not like that in this case.
It depends on what your director wants and also what your performers that are portraying these two want, because this is something that I have heard talk of amongst other people, that sometimes you could consider Colline and Schaunard a couple, as in like they are lovers and things like that. Like you could play that dynamic out. You don't have to, but it is an option.
Why do I get the feeling that there's very much a Working Girl, the musical conundrum going on here from Bob's Burgers, with Tina being like, "Oh, I'm going to be with this guy," and
right,
the lead singer being like, "No, you're not. That's not part of it." He's like, "Oh, well, I'm taking a creative
license, right?
I'm taking it's in my creative field here." No, it's not at all.
Well, so what did you think of these two? And I mean, again, because
I really enjoyed when they were talking about how Mimi has cello under her thumb.
Or so wait, do you mean? Oh, right, when Musetta shows up, right?
Musetta shows up, yeah.
Right.
When Musetta shows up and starts,
showing,
flaunting and everything, trying to get him to do something, and he just ends up. He ends up getting played like a jaw harp there.
A jaw harp,
of course. Can't use the same instruments as the era.
Oh,
wouldn't be fair.
So instead of him being played like a fiddle, he's played like a jaw harp instead, huh? Okay. Oh man, there's a few other. There's. We also have technically. Benoit is the name of the landlord, and we don't ever actually hear it I don't believe they ever say it, but the guy that Musetta shows up with in Act 2, his name is Alcindoro, and he is like a politician or something like that. Generally speaking, that is a role that is played by like a character singer, and so they will do both of those roles. Because they're effectively doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Their characters are the same. So what did you think about that character?
Felt bad for him. I mean, like, he
in both instances?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
He got pretty used.
You felt bad for the landlord?
He went there to get paid. He went there to get his rent because, like, money due is money due. And at the end of the day, he ended up not getting any money. He just got kicked out. He got the ability to tell a story and then got kicked out and shamed for it.
Now, since they come back to the loft in Act 4, I presume at some point someone did actually pay him. Because, like, after 6 months, and it has to have been at least 6 months since when we started, or in terms of how much rent they owe, at some point, you're just going to throw them out. Like, especially in that day. Like these days, maybe you can go to the rent board or something like that. Now we have things set up that can give the renter the tenant a little bit more safety. But back in those days, I mean, they can just kick you out whenever the heck they want.
It could, but you also got to remember that sometimes, especially with these 4 people, they can be very good gaslighters.
I mean, I guess it's good that they know how to survive.
Yep, this is an urban survival check that they are acing, if you ask me.
Okay, and so with the politician in Act 2 with Musetta, you feel sorry for him? I mean, actually, that one, I guess, just
like he's just being himself, and he's like finds a girl he finds attractive and wants to settle down and do get friendly with,
right?
And that, but at the end of the day, she's like, "No, I am who I am, and you can't have me." That's kind of it's not wrong of her to do, but it is wrong of her to lead him along, have him buy her everything, and then end up just like screwing off with some other guy.
So as opposed to having an established understanding of him being a sugar daddy, instead she just sweeps him along thinking that he's getting something which he honestly isn't.
Yes.
Okay. So if it was the other way around, where he is still just kind of being like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe you're doing this out in public," sort of thing, it's kind of annoying, but at the same time, if they had that establishment of like, yes, I will pay for these things because that's just what type of relationship we have, then it's less of an issue.
Yeah, exactly. Because, the boundaries were clearly defined, where in this case, they absolutely weren't.
Okay.
He was not happy about it all. It was very like set in stone in how he reacted.
All right. So this leads to some pretty cool things to talk about. So the way the story frames it is that everything that Rodolfo, Mimi, Marcello, Musetta, Colline, and Schonard do is all good. They're the good guys in this story, right? And so
they're the protagonists, yeah.
Yes, so them kicking Benoit out and not having to pay their rent is a good thing. Musetta abandoning Alcindoro and leaving him with both bills to pay and then just like never showing up again, that is seen as a good thing. So, well, what's your take on that?
Well, I don't believe in good or evil. There's no such thing as black and white. All we have are just different shades of gray. So to me, the way they portray it, yeah, I can see it. It's clear, but it doesn't mean I agree with it.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, I've always been somebody who kind of looks at the outliers and say, well, what's going on over there? Then again, I might suffer a lot from that, what's that German term? Where you pass somebody and like you can, for that brief moment that you pass them, you realize that they have their entire life around them and none of that involves you.
Oh, shoot. I know what term you're referring to as well, but I can't remember. I'm not remembering right now what the heck it's called either. Because for a moment, I thought you were immediately just going to jump to Schadenfreude, and I'm like, what? You take pleasure in others' pain? What? What the heck does that have to do with gray, with black and white and gray, Myles? That makes no sense. Let's see. Okay, so with that in mind, how likely would you be to watch more operas, especially older ones, that very much fall into that dichotomy of you have the protagonists who are good, and then you have the antagonists who are bad. And all the happy music goes towards the protagonists, and all the really mean and depressing or just evil-sounding music goes towards the antagonists. What are your thoughts on that? There's not really a whole lot of gray in older operas.
Well, it is what it is. And like I said, I accept it for the product of the time it is.
Okay.
But of course, we don't live in a world that is so black and white. And no matter how much people try to portray it for simplicity's sake, it can really take away from what actually is.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't necessarily hate it for it.
Right.
I accept it for what it is, but I can accept something without agreeing with it.
Fair enough. Okay, so actually, before we jump into that thing, so because I just realized that there's a couple other operas that I really want to watch with you, because they're operas that, again, are set up with this black and white dichotomy of whole, these are the good guys and these are the bad guys, and sometimes, bad things still happen to the good guys by way of the good guys. Sometimes they try to input a little bit of gray into it, but there are a couple operas that I really like because of the music in them, but as far as stories go, I'm just like, man, everyone in here sucks. Except for that person, and that person died. And that was tragic, because they didn't have to. Because they only died because everyone else sucks. And for whatever reason...
Didn't we see a movie like that too recently?
Actually, that's true. Actually, now that I think about it, that is basically what we saw with Repo.
Yeah, that was Repo.
Because that's Blind Meg.
Yeah, look at that. It is an opera. Ha, proved you wrong.
Well, like I said, it has operatic aspects in it. That's why I call it a musical experience.
Just like an opera.
Exactly. Yeah, right. But yeah, I mean, there's a few others that I do want to watch with you, just to like kind of hear your opinions on them and kind of see if they end up tracking with mine. Because
I just love how you're like, the genetic opera is not an opera. It's a musical experience. And I'm like, okay, that's not a dog. It's a heckin' pupper.
Yes, there are some of us that live under technicalities, and I am one of those people.
Well, there's no technology here, so...
See, this is why I know I would be a very good bureaucrat. I don't know if I would necessarily love it, but I know that I would be very good at it. So now maybe we'll move it towards some other things that are just kind of about opera. So you were kind of commenting on how, I can't really necessarily take these people seriously as being poor because they look so well fed.
Yes.
So this is an interesting thing that I have heard people say about opera a whole lot. And a lot of times also when people see me and they think, oh, you do opera? I thought all opera singers are fat. And I was like, well, maybe it used to be
only the successful ones.
Well, okay, so there's...
punch you in the shoulder here.
Okay, so there's also that. If they're successful, they're well fed because they're well taken care of and they're well paid, right? But then there's also the aspect of if you are these people that are getting paid to be the principals for a metropolitan opera show, that probably means they got, like $30,000 for that one show. And then they probably have several other shows or gigs throughout the year, and they're probably hauling in, maybe if they are really, really, really good, they're making six figures or something like that. And there's me, just like scrambling away trying to make sure that I can maybe pay taxes this year or something like that.
Well, it's a tough gig.
Yes.
It's a really tough gig. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't really realize is that it's very competitive. And unfortunately over here, it's damn near not lucrative, which sucks.
Yes, there is also a little bit of that as well, which, there are cultural aspects of it. And there's a whole lot of socio-political reasons for why in North America opera is not on the same level as it is in, maybe not every part of the world, but very much so in like Asia and Europe.
I was actually kind of talking about this the other day with my D&D group about like opera and all that kind of stuff. And they were like, yeah, we don't really have an emphasis on the arts here. Or they started off with like, everybody else has a really big emphasis on arts. And I'm like, yeah, except for us, because we're not allowed to have that. Because we are wage slaves and we have to do as we're told and not enjoy anything. And then they're like, oh my God, you're absolutely right.
I mean, that is definitely not an incorrect way to look at it. You know, that basically just means that we are all, in our own ways, Rodolfos, Marcellos, Collines, and Chonards. We're just struggling to have something that is joyful and also be paid for doing that as well.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. I mean, I get the feeling that these guys probably could just go out and be laborers. It would suck. But then that means they can't be artists either, because they're tired at the end of the day. Because when you're digging ditches, especially back in the 1830s, you're digging ditches for like 12 hours a day, and you're tired.
12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I mean, hey, if there's a war going on or something like that, or a plague comes through, there are a lot, well, I guess that's maybe grave diggers, but, you know, great ditch digger, grave digger,
You probably get hired by both people.
Yep, you got to dig a hole. Just
go out there and be the best damn ditch digger you can be.
Exactly. I mean, no, I'm not going to say that. I was going to go on something where I knew it was going to just take us on like a sidetrack that I'm like, no, I don't want to actually do that. So, I mean, we can talk all we want about how opera and the arts in general, the performing arts, definitely deserves a little bit more love in North America. But to go back to my original thing that I was saying about opera stars, opera singers are fat. So this kind of goes back into kind of an older belief, which was all you had to do as a singer was take care of your voice. You're not really expected to go out there and act. You're expected to go out there and sing beautifully, and everybody loves it, because opera singers are the Olympic athletes of singing in terms of your ability, how well trained you are, and what your performance capability is. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can sacrifice time for taking care of the rest of your body. And there was also just this older thought of, well, I don't need to. I don't need to go out and run and do things because I'm successful. I can pay people to do that for me, or people will do that for me because they know who I am. Whereas these days, now opera stars look fit, or they look maybe not necessarily well-fed, but they definitely don't look
malnourished
fat.
Or that.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And again, this will probably vary from place to place as well. Because while there's a few singers that I have seen, that I have followed, that they probably look like they run marathons in their spare time, and there aren't really a lot of them that look like that. However, in me saying that, Myles, if you saw someone who looked like that in this role, would you still have the same problem?
Probably.
Like
Probably even more so.
Like you have a guy where in the few times where they show any kind of skin, and like he's got veins sticking out of his arms because he looks like he's a power lifter or something like that. What would your reaction be to that?
I'd kind of be a little suspicious as well, because that's even more so difficult to maintain. Having like muscular definition is a very difficult thing to maintain. It requires a lot of work. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't realize it. Like one of the things that I've noticed and I've talked about with a lot of people is everybody goes like, "Oh, Aboriginal people are like so fit," and I'm like, no, that's not who they were originally supposed to be. That's an actual force to change that. Our residential schools and that kind of did. That's not how they're supposed to be. If you take a look at Cree people, they're actually supposed to have a little bit of fat on them. Why? Well, they're living in tents in the middle of winter.
Yep.
Like, you got to have some of that beef on you,
Yep.
a little bit of fat to insulate you. Fat is an excellent insulation.
Mm-hmm. That's why it's such a high fat diet too. Like pemmican, the bison meat, pretty much everything in the diet is made to make sure that you do not freeze to death.
Yep, that's exactly it. And, so seeing, especially, it's one of my big issues with Pocahontas from Disney. It's like, they're so muscular, and it's like, who the hell are you trying to impress here? Like,
Myles, I thought you hadn't seen Disney movies before.
Oh, I have seen a few, but not all of them.
Oh, not all of them, huh? I think that might be... might have to hold on to something like
Everybody's been hounding on me for years and years going, oh, you haven't seen all of these Disney movies? And I'm just saying, you know what? Fine. I'm going to watch all the Disney movies. Not just the Renaissance era, not just the after Renaissance. All of Disney,
of them.
including all of their war movies that people don't realize they've done.
Oh man, those war movies are great.
I know.
You had some fun stuff like Donald Duck, taking on Hitler.
Mind Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And like all of their training videos that they have for like being a tail gunner.
Yep. All sorts of things. Well,
that was a genius idea, but I mean, we should get back on topic here.
I know. I just kind of wanted to address that because it's something. It's funny because it is something that I still do hear very often, and it's one of those things where I sit there going, so when you see a hockey player that is out of their equipment, do you just like go, oh, you're a hockey player? I never would have guessed.
It depends on the hockey player, because if they're a bruiser or something like that, like if they're only there to hurt other people and not pass the puck around and score goals, an enforcer, I guess you'd say.
Right.
I call him a Sokol because of the payday game.
Right.
But if you're just there to like hit them, by all means, pack on that weight, slam them up against the
slam against the boards.
The boards and that, you're going to be doing the job just fine. As long as if you can catch them, put on that extra weight. That way when you hit them, it's even worse.
As opposed to if you see like Connor McDavid, out in the day-to-day life, or Wayne Gretzky, if we're talking 20 years ago, back when he was still playing.
I was going to say, like, nowadays, Wayne Gretzky does not look like a hockey player now. But, time makes fools of us all.
Yes, exactly. I don't know. I just wanted to touch on that because it's interesting because it's something that I hear so often, and I'm always just kind of like, we're not fat. No. And I mean, I don't know. That just feels like these days, I don't know. Like the days of the heroin chic, thin as a rail are behind us. I like to think there are probably still some people that are rich enough to go with that lifestyle, but most people generally don't look like that.
That's very true.
And even the ones that are rich enough to be able to afford to do that, they don't look like that because it's not fashionable anymore.
And it's difficult. It's hard to hold and maintain.
Yeah, that too. I have heard a lot of that from friends of mine that are in like the fitness business, where they talk about, oh yeah, when you see, Henry Cavill shirtless in, that one scene or whatever from, any movie where he has to take his shirt off, which is lots of them. When you look that good, you got to show it off, right? And they explained to me, oh yeah, he probably had to do that 2-day, like cram himself full of like sugar and stuff like that to really like beef up his muscles. And then he just dehydrates himself for 24 hours to get that cut look. You can't do that for extended periods because you'll hurt yourself.
It just reminds me of The Good Place with the one demon who looks like a fireman and who's always taking his shirt off.
Oh.
Hilarious. Such a good show.
Okay, so to get into the opera again, so in opera, generally speaking, you have two genres. You have either tragedies or you have comedies. At least that's the way it was for most of like the 1600s and 1700s, and then a little bit into the 1800s, and then it started to change a little bit. So now things are not strictly comedy or tragedy anymore. Now, upon looking at this, what would you consider La Bohème?
I would say it's a tragedy.
All right, and why would you think that?
Because the character dies in the end, one of the main ones, and everybody's sad about it. It's not like they're passing jokes about it. They're very somber. By all means, they have some comedy in the beginning, but that's just to help contrast and really deliver that blow in the end.
Okay, all right. I just was curious what you would think about that, because for older ones, I mean, again, this first came out in 1896, so the 1800s were almost behind us. So for, again, the previous like 250, almost 300 years, most operas, if it's tragedy, there is no comedy. There might be a little light scene between, for like the chorus or something like that. But generally speaking, if you're doing something like Lucia de Lammermoor, it's hard drama all the time because everybody dies in the end. It's like there's maybe 2 or 3 characters that are left standing by the end of the opera. As opposed to comedies where, generally speaking, people don't die. There's nothing funny about death. Or at least that's not what they think.
Well, so, then they're wrong.
Right? I can think of plenty of comedies that have to do with death.
Take a look at Herb Kazaz.
Well,
he beat cancer and then died from a peanut allergy.
Well, I was even just thinking of specific films like...
In a car accident.
I was just thinking of specific films like Death of Stalin, for example. That is very much just a comedy. Comedy of errors, comedy of tragedy, whatever. So you would consider this one more of a tragedy purely, and not really like a tragic comedy. Tragic comedy?
I'd say it's more of a comic tragedy.
Okay.
But
it has
a little bit of humor in the beginning, but like I said, it's more to contrast about the death.
Gotcha.
Because of course the comedy doesn't happen in the second half,
right?
So it immediately gets cut out. It's just used to kind of like it. It's a roller coaster ride. Mm-hmm. You have to go up in order to come down. So if you don't go up, then your drop down isn't as bad. Mm-hmm. So
that is actually a really good way to look at it. Because even in Act 4, we have the brief little scene where all four of the bros are back together and they're goofing off and things like that. And that's a couple minutes before Musetta crashes the party.
Yep.
With a dying Mimi. So getting into the story, what was your favorite part?
Ooh, that's difficult. That's difficult because it's so organic. It really flows into itself.
Mm-hmm. So there wasn't a specific time that you were watching that you just kind of were struck by, ooh, I like this. I'm going to remember this. Like this specific part?
Not entirely. One part that did stand out to me was the toy seller.
Oh, yeah. Parpignol is his name. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he's sort of... he doesn't really pertain to the plot. It's just sort of like...
He's just part of the people selling their wares when they're out in the market.
Yeah, it had very little to actually do with the fact that he's part of the cast and what's going on. He's just in the backdrop. And I don't really want to say that because then it kind of takes away from the rest of the story. It might make people think, oh, well, he liked the backdrop more than the actual story. No, that's not the case at all.
Is that a bad thing, though? Like, this is also one of the reasons why I look at Bohème as a good intro opera for people that aren't really into opera, because of the fact that, as you've said, it's so organic, and the fact that you're able to look at something that happened in the backdrop and say, I really like that part, that says a lot about trying to make it seem real. Because if I were to show you like a Mozart opera or something, you'd probably look at the chorus scenes as just being really perfunctory and why were these even here sort of thing. What was the point?
So because you're saying this, I'm going to have to show you another show.
Okay.
A show where literally the backdrop takes over the whole show. And
what show is this called?
I'm not going to say until we do it.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to have to introduce it to you. And I think you'll be solar opposite about it.
Okay. Okay, I see. Okay. But I mean, again, I look at you saying that you really liked Parpignol as a good
I remember
thing.
it. I remember that.
Yeah, but that's good too.
Yeah.
If that is something that sticks with you, that's important.
Okay, well, you say that, but remembering that the powerhouses or the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell is not that important, but it still stuck with me.
But it is important. It is important to remember that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. That's how everything works.
What about the gland above penguin's nose that filters salt from water?
The what?
There's a gland above a penguin's nose that filters salt from salt water, so that way they can have drinkable water.
I mean, that is also kind of... Wow, that's pretty cool.
It's cool, yeah, but I don't have to remember it. I'm not a marine biologist.
So what?
I put furnaces in. I make warm air happen and cool air happen even more.
Come on, that's like saying that you don't appreciate understanding the difference between gas operated or the different types of gas operation for firearms versus, simple blowback or delayed blowback or inertial recoil and that sort of thing.
And everybody listening to us right now is like, those are the same thing.
I mean, are they though?
No, they're not. Not at all.
No, they're not.
It's like the difference between miles. The difference is how it's spelt and what it means.
Yes, it absolutely is. So my favorite part of this opera is another small bit because, Parpignol is on stage for like 2 minutes. Maybe 2 minutes. And this also, the thing that always sticks to me from this opera is when Colline gets to sing, when he sings his little aria about having to sell his coat so that he too can take a part in trying to either save Mimi or just make her comfortable in her last moments. And it doesn't last very long. It's like a minute that he sings. But there's this whole thing about how he's a man of few words and he's a philosopher and all that. So when he gets up to talk, it's important. So everything in the show just kind of stops and focuses on him for a minute. And again, it's also just really cute is not the right word, but there's just something so just
not nostalgic. It's warm. It's memorable.
Exactly. And it's comforting to see how much he cares as well.
Even though it was all kind of for naught, because he could have just covered her with the jacket.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, this is why he's a philosopher and not an actual...
not a doctor.
Not a engineer or something like that.
Right. I mean, I don't necessarily know if I would say most of these people are the smartest out there. I mean, even if we think about the costumes that we have for this show, when Mimi first shows up and she has like a shawl on her, and the shawl is like full of holes. And I'm just wondering, what the heck is up with this?
Yeah,
how is she going to stay warm with that? There's just holes everywhere.
Especially when you think about that dress. It has that giant hole in the bottom. Like, what the hell?
But that's how... Okay. All right. Well, we'll move along from that. Jeez.
How did you walk into that one?
I don't know.
One would think you'd actually have to step into it, pull it over you, and then strap it up.
Oh,
but
God. Yeah, what? How is it? We put our pants on both legs at a time, or wait, no. That's not. That's not what he says. We both put our bras on one leg at a time. That's what he said.
Who said that one again?
That's Abe from Clone High.
That's right. Yeah, we put our bras on one leg at a time. Yep. Mix up our idioms. You open this can of worms, now lay in it.
I know. Well, you know.
No, they're not idioms. Those are antonyms.
Yeah, right.
I think that's what the term is. I want to make sure I get that right. I
think so. I mean, homonyms I know are things that are like the... Actually, I think homonyms has more to do with like specific words and not whole phrases, but perhaps it's also extended out into...
Malaphors.
Right.
Malaphors.
Yes. Because you think it's the correct thing, but it's wrong. And you've...
No, it's when you mix up metaphors.
Yes,
you
right.
get malaphors.
Yeah, right.
So, like, when you say...
you miss the forest for the lake?
Yeah, you miss the forest.
Or you miss the...
You miss the lake through the forest.
Yeah.
So, you can't see the lake through the water, or you can't see the forest through the trees, but you take those two and you put them together.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, like I said, if you open a can of worms, or you opened your can of worms, now lay in it.
Yeah,
instead of you made your bed, lay in it, or you opened your can of worms, now eat it.
Yeah.
You mix them.
Who says you opened your can of worms, now eat it? I've never heard the last bit
That's
of that.
just one that's everybody has...
Everybody just knows I'm going to open a can of worms.
Yeah.
You know, the elephant in the room, right?
Yes. Or some of my other favorite idioms, such as, I see this isn't your first Panic at the Disco. Or you can lead a horse to evanescence, but you can't bring it back to life.
Oh, God. That's horrible. You know, that's just, I wouldn't say I feel everyone is dumber for having heard it, but it's certainly getting there sometimes.
Oh, they're cultural metaphors.
Yeah, I suppose they are. So again, to kind of go back to what you were saying all the way at the beginning about how you're not really fond of musicals in a way, but opera, this worked for you. Is there anything more that you can kind of, I guess, bring out about it that what necessarily worked for you?
I think it's because of that flow. A lot of musicals, I find, the emphasis is so hard on the music that it's like the show stops in between each musical. And in this case, that was not the issue because everything kind of flowed through. Right. And it's the exact same with the genetic opera.
Right.
Everything just kind of flowed through. And even if they weren't singing to each other in their like small little bits,
right,
it was like they were warming up to do their next vocal. And they were still putting that effort in to continue it forward. And it didn't feel like it was being cut and paste. And then how are we going to link song A to song B? Well, we can do this way. And like you said, it's organic. It wasn't mechanical.
Yeah.
Whereas all of these musicals that I've seen and heard are just like start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. It's traffic.
Okay. I feel like I need to go and just collect a couple of musicals that you haven't seen yet and maybe try to introduce them to you the same way as this, because I feel like you just haven't seen the right musicals. Now, granted, this is coming from someone who sings for a living, so of course, I enjoy musicals as much as I enjoy operas. Although, that's not always the case, because as soon as you said, I've seen High School Musical, and I'm sitting here going, man, I've only seen 5 minutes of that, and that's enough. I did not need to see any more.
It's true. But I did see Les Miserables. And,
Les Miserables?
Les Miserables. And I felt it to just be not good.
Fair enough. Well, you're talking about the movie, right? That had Hugh Jackman in it?
Yep. And Sweeney Todd was also one I didn't really like.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Again, it was just the way that it just didn't flow well for me.
That's fair. Yeah, no, I'm sitting here thinking, I feel like I need to actually have you watch actual staged musicals as opposed to the film adaptations of them, because I have my own list of issues with a lot of adapted musicals for film, because most of them I find suck for various reasons that we can go into at another time.
But what about movies that get turned into musicals like The Die
Spamalot?
Spamalot was pretty great.
Yep.
I can see that. I can say that.
So sometimes it works. Like it.
Work hard, or die trying, girl.
See. Sometimes it works. You just need to find the right things to get it to. You just need to find the right thing to do it with, which again is why I picked Bohème for your first opera experience.
Yes.
And it sounds like you're more than happy to experience some more. So maybe next time... Actually, no, we won't do that. But at some point in the future, I probably will have you watch Madame Butterfly just so that you truly understand what I was talking about with Mary and Max.
I'm okay with that. I'm willing to wait for it.
Sounds good. In the meantime, the next time... Well, we'll see what's happening the next time. But for right now, I've been Cam.
And I'm Myles.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya.